In a quiet suburban development in Texas, a homeowner named Robert Ellis received a staggering $250,000 fine from his homeowners association for what they call violations on his property, including an unapproved fence and landscaping changes. Little did the HOA board know that Robert, through diligent research into old land records, would uncover evidence that he actually owned the entire neighborhood, turning the tables in a dispute that reshaped the community forever. Robert Ellis had purchased his home in the Oak Ridge Estate subdivision back in 2005, drawn to the peaceful streets and well-maintained common areas. He was a retired engineer, methodical in his approach to everything, and he kept his property in good order. The HOA, led by a board of 5 members including President Karen Wilkins, enforced rules strictly, often issuing fines for minor infractions like overgrown lawns or unauthorized decorations. Robert had clashed with them before over small issues, but nothing prepared him for the escalation that began in early 2022. The trouble started when Robert decided to install a privacy fence around his backyard. He submitted the plans to the HOA Architectural Committee, but they rejected them, citing that the fence style didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. Undeterred, Robert went ahead with the installation, believing the rule was overly restrictive and not clearly defined in the covenants. A few weeks later, he added some native plants to his front yard, aiming for a low-maintenance, eco-friendly landscape. The HOA saw this as another violation, claiming it deviated from the approved plant list. Notices arrived in Robert's mailbox. First warnings, then fines. The amount started small, $1.50 for the fence, $25 for the plants, but they accumulated daily. Karen Wilkins, who lived 3 houses down, took a personal interest in the matter, driving by Robert's house regularly to document what she called ongoing violations. By mid-2022, the fines had ballooned to $10,000, with the HOA threatening liens on his property if he didn't comply. Robert contested the fines at HOA meetings, arguing that the rules were arbitrary and that his changes improved the property value. The board dismissed his concerns, voting unanimously to uphold the penalties. Frustrated, Robert hired a lawyer, David Thompson, to review the HOA documents and explore his options. David suggested digging into the property's history, as older subdivisions sometimes had irregularities in their formation. Robert spent months at the county records office, poring over deeds, plats, and historical surveys. What he discovered was astonishing. The land for Oak Ridge Estates had been part of a larger tract owned by his great-grandfather, Elias Ellis, in the early 1900s. Elias had sold portions over the years, but a clerical error in the 1950s meant that the subdivision's common areas and several lots were never properly transferred. Technically, Robert, as the direct heir, still held title to much of the land underlying the neighborhood. Armed with this information, Robert and David filed a quiet title action in court, seeking to clarify ownership. The HOA, unaware of the full scope, continued to pursue their fines, escalating them to $250,000 by late 2022 for what they termed willful and repeated violations. They placed a lien on Robert's house and began foreclosure proceedings, confident in their authority. The court hearing in January 2023 revealed the truth. Robert presented chain of title documents, surveys from the 1920s, and expert testimony from a title examiner. The judge ruled that due to historical error, Robert indeed owned the underlying land for the entire 50-home neighborhood, including roads, parks, and amenities. The HOA's covenants were deemed unenforceable on land they didn't control. The board was stunned. Karen Wilkins argued that the HOA had operated for decades without issue, but the judge pointed out that possession didn't equal ownership. The ruling dissolved the HOA's authority over Robert's property and required them to compensate him for legal fees and improper fines. Moreover, since Robert owned the land, he could charge rent or impose his own rules if he chose. In the aftermath, Robert didn't seek revenge. He offered to sell the land back to the homeowners at a fair price, forming a new voluntary association with more reasonable guidelines. Many residents, relieved to escape the old HOA's tyranny, agreed. Karen stepped down as president, and the neighborhood adopted transparent processes for decisions. The case made local news, highlighting the importance of thorough title searches and the potential pitfalls of HOA governance. Robert's discovery not only cleared his fines, but also empowered other homeowners to question overreaching associations. He continued living in his home, now with his approved fence and garden, a symbol of his quiet victory. Word spread beyond Texas, with similar cases emerging in other states where historical land errors surfaced. Robert shared his story at real estate seminars, advising buyers to investigate deeply. The experience changed him, turning a routine dispute into a lesson in persistence and history. The neighborhood transformed under the new association. Residents participated more actively, voting on rules that balanced individual rights with community standards. Robert's land ownership gave him leverage, but he used it sparingly, focusing on harmony. Years later, in 2025, Robert reflected on the events. The $250,000 fine that once threatened his home had led to owning the neighborhood, a twist no one saw coming. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the ground beneath our feet holds secrets that can upend everything.